Before we get into anything heavy here, what did you have any good snacks there today, James?
Oh, we just had like potato salad and they had chicken, steak, smoked.
Sounds great.
What's that? Chantilly cake from Whole Foods. Do you guys know what that cake? That berry cake? Best cake
No,
in the
but it
world. If you've never
sounds
had
like really moist and delicious.
it. It is very moist and delicious. Welcome to Talk Like a Mother Parenting Autism Podcast. We are Jen, Kim, Rachel, and Jamie. Take a seat at our table as we share with hope, humor, and honesty.
Hello, welcome to Talk Like a Mother. Thank you for joining us tonight. We're going to be talking about therapies that we have tried with our children and what they offer in our each individual areas. Obviously, we have an array of different states. We have Rachel, who lives in Minnesota, Jen from Vancouver, Jamie is in Colorado, and I'm in Massachusetts. And also we have a large variance of ages, which also definitely changes, the availability. Obviously, what was available 20 years ago compared to what was available now is, a lot different. So I guess I'll start. So when Alyssa was diagnosed at 2 years and 3 months, and the first therapy that we were recommended to do was ABA. That was basically the only proven therapy that they had to help with autism as far as like progression and decreasing behaviors and stuff like that. So because Alyssa was under 3 years old, the school system here takes over at 3. So kind of before that, you do early intervention, which we got involved in when she was like 20 months. They had a huge wait list for speech then. They only had one speech therapist that worked for early intervention in our area. And even back then, which was, she had a huge caseload. So she was involved in early intervention for months before she saw a speech therapist. She started out with like kind of like like an educational consultant, I guess, is like the typical ABA early intervention person that would kind of come and just kind of talk about like, help me. They helped us get on the waiting list for evaluation and all that stuff. She was able to access occupational therapy prior to speech, which she had very, very high sensory needs, where she kind of had the sensory avoidance and the sensory seeking at the same time. So her system was just like completely out of whack. They tried like a brushing program with her and just lots and lots of input. And then we got on the wait list for ABA and got that, which she got that between like 2 and 3. That phased out. Yeah, that phase she has her. Did you like ABA?
Yeah.
Didn't seem like it. She then here the school system took over at 3. At that time, they didn't have ABA services inside the school systems. They didn't have autism classrooms. They didn't have any of that stuff. She was outsourced to a collaborative program. Luckily for us, was still in our town. In there, she received speech, OT, physical therapy. They did have ABA practices where they did discrete trials. They did the behavior modification stuff. It just wasn't like actual ABA. So those are the things that we started out with. Of course, then at the time I kind of thought, get her speech, they'll teach her to talk, and then everything is going to be fine. She's going to be caught up by kindergarten, because in my mind, that's what I thought a speech therapist did. They taught you how to talk. Like, so she just needed that little bit of a push. Yeah. You talk now, right? Yeah. And then that obviously didn't happen. We then also got OT and speech services outside. Like we got it paid through her insurance. So she did it at school during school hours, and then she did it a couple days a week after school. But after probably like a year of doing that, it just became too much. Like she was already in school all day long till 3. And then I had to drag my son and her and like race to get to the clinic, to do. And obviously it helped to a point, but she wasn't talking. She wasn't making sounds. It wasn't really, nothing that was like, oh, we really have to keep doing this type of thing. And she was also getting it in school. So we kind of like faded that out after a while. I think probably for about a year. We have gone back and forth with speech over the years. Where like I'd pick it up at, different therapy places at different times, but we never really stuck to it just because between work, between 4 kids, between her being in school, like it always just became overwhelming. We've had speech therapists come to the house. We've had behaviorists come to the house. People set up like the PEC system here for her, which is, do they still do? Is that still a thing? I don't know if that's even a thing anymore. Where they do the pictures, and she was of course very stubborn with that. And she only did that for like extremely preferred items, like to go outside, she would do it. she would pick it between two food items, but like she really wouldn't independently do it. I mean, we had these things all over our house, on the doors, on the fridge. It was
Yeah.
like we had this whole binder with them, and she did it at school. So they had a big binder that she did at school, and she did really well with it at school, but it never really carried over to home. So communication at home was always a struggle, but she was able to non-verbally communicate. She gets her point across pretty well most of the time. So yeah, like we end up just really sticking with the school. She was in a great school program. It was a 1-to-2 ratio. You know, they kind of gave her everything she needed and tried to give us the tools to carry over at home as much as they could. But obviously, it's only what she's kind of willing to do. So those are like the main basis of what we did. We did bring her to like a diet specialist at one time. They put her on a special diet. This was supposed to, you know, get all these toxins out, and we had to get stool samples, which she wouldn't go in the bathroom with the plastic, so we had to like shut the water off so we could like scoop it out of the toilet. And they found out that she does not process vitamin B6. She does not also process yeast of her body, which is why she has issues and she takes antibiotics and stuff like that. They want her to do vitamin supplements, but like I can't get her to barely eat, never mind take vitamins. So that wasn't successful for us. We got a $2,000 grant to go to this specialized place to, you know, try this out. But some people have great success with the diet stuff. I mean, she did lose weight, so that was great. We all lost weight, so that was great. And it was one of those things that in the beginning we're like, oh, even I felt more clear, you know, like that brain fog lifts. But nothing major. No, we were spending boatloads of money. I mean, this was like 2008, and we were spending like $500 a week on groceries, and we could not sustain that. And it obviously, if it made a huge change, we would have like figured something out, but it didn't really make that big of a change for her. So that's like you know, she's done like music therapy at school, which she really liked. She really enjoyed. She's done like yoga. I know that's not like a therapy, but like it's therapeutic, I guess. So she always really enjoys art at school and stuff like that too. But there's really been nothing that's like really just been that thing for her. Like it's just someday I'd like to maybe try that spelling to communicate, but that's not accessible in Massachusetts. It's not considered valid here, so it's not covered by insurance. We would have to literally travel to another state, find somebody who could like take us, train us in a week, and like send us home, and hope that like she would continue to do it at home if she took to it. So it's also a pretty big stretch, but I would at some point like to try it because, you know, she's pretty amazing. She's bright. I mean, she knows who Spider-Man is. We just found out this weekend. So I had no idea of that. So I think that's pretty much the gist of all the therapies that we've done.
Mine will be kind of mixed like service/therapies because we haven't done like a ton of different therapies. We've mostly done ABA, which I know is controversial, but in our area, it's more available and accessible. Like not as many.
And like I was saying when I started, Jaime, like, so we have lots of ABA centers now, but like we didn't have anything like that probably until Alyssa was like a teenager. So, you know, by that point, it was not something we could
probably won't even
access.
taking
Well, exactly.
Some of them, it's like once they're like 7, they're like,
I feel like if she was diagnosed now or like in the past 10 years, that's probably the route we would have went because they wouldn't have. I think the collaboratives are kind of like a dying like thing just because there's so many autism classrooms inside schools and stuff like that, but that obviously just wasn't the case for her.
yeah. So Jesse was officially diagnosed right before he turned 5, but we started him basically in the school system because his doctor had concerns around 3. Well, 2 was the first time we went and they kind of like weren't too worried. And then we went back at 3, but through that and through our local school district, we got him into early intervention/preschool type thing. And that's where all our therapies and stuff started. So it didn't start at diagnosis. We started kind of getting him in stuff through the school and the county before we got our medical diagnosis. So he had an autism diagnosis through school first, and then you need the medical one for all the insurance stuff.
So wild to me still.
Yeah, we did a special needs camp where supplies. It was just like, I mean, a 1-week day camp that he did. And it was kind of cool because like the parents had like an opportunity to like be educated on different programs and stuff in our state, but he did like, they have a physical therapist there, music therapy, OT, speech, like all there. And so that was kind of our first delve ever doing therapy. And he was okay. The thing with Jesse was like, when we first looked into doing therapies and stuff, I couldn't even imagine him interacting with another person. And so like, it was like, okay, we can get on these wait lists and pay a lot of money right now while we were waiting to get the diagnosis, because you can't get the insurance really to help you until you have the diagnosis and all that jazz. But I literally just felt like he's just not gonna do it, because there was just such a lack of like awareness from him, I guess, that he just didn't really interact with very many people at all, unless it was very high volume energy and attention, and that was only still with certain people. And so I should have maybe tried, and I don't know. I just kept believing, like hoping, like people are like, oh, some kids don't talk till they're this 3, and some people, all that kind of stuff. But once he had a diagnosis, we soon after got into ABA, and it was like COVID. So he was diagnosed at the end of 2019. So we started talking to places and getting on wait lists and kind of stuff like that. But so by the time we got into a place, it was like full COVID, but they had like in-center, which was nice. We eventually did in home for a little while, which was really great. And I will say, like, we were always really involved with his ABA, and all the things they did were, they helped him with some speech stuff. And he got to the point he memorized our phone numbers and our address. He doesn't have those memorized anymore. He doesn't have retention really a lot for stuff, but they did like help us a lot with things. Like he started brushing his teeth on his own. We still brush them now, but that's just to make sure they're clean. But like things like that we weren't sure were ever possible, like really did help. And just having someone by his side. And then when he was starting in preschool, even before all that, he did do speech and OT at preschool. And that's kind of just where I kind of knew that he wasn't very responsive, like, because it would take him like almost the whole year to even interact with the person. So once he went into kindergarten, we started him kindergarten a year late, he did speech and OT through school, and that's gone pretty well. And he's had a lot of improvement there. I don't think I regret doing ABA at all, but it did take up so much of our time that we didn't have the option to do other things unless he was in therapy like an insane amount of hours a week, and I did not want that. So I was like, okay, we're kind of doing the ABA path, and we're not going to stack on OT and speech on outside of school on top of that. So he did ABA up through the first grade, all the way through first grade. And then we decided to stop. Was that last summer or the summer before?
I think it was last summer, but remember that
It
you
was before
had,
Europe, right?
it was before Europe. I mean, you can edit this, but it was like before ADHD, before, right? Like
Yes.
this
Well,
additional.
it was, that's what I'll say. So, okay, so we were doing ABA, and it got to the point where we had a great BCBA, which I've talked about him before, and a great RBT. And then we went back into center from being in home for a while, and we lost our really great RBT. And we've had other great RBTs, but she was just really consistent, which was nice. And then his BCBA was like ready to like have Jesse graduate, and that BCBA left, and the next one he had wanted to keep him longer. And then she started saying, well, there's this issue and this issue, and she was pushing for us to get the ADHD diagnosis, which she was the first person. Like, I always felt that he probably had ADHD, but no one really could differentiate or tell us. And so I do appreciate that from her. But I just got like, she just wanted to get him on meds for the therapy to work. And I'm like, well, if meds are supposed to be able to solve what's happening in the not taking away autism or anything like that, but in those categories, then why are we doing ABA and whatever? So it just kind of got weird towards the end with ABA, where we just didn't see a lot of progress. And so we decided to pull them out. And I was just sick of the inconsistencies. I think that's the problem we get with a lot of therapies. Like, we had a really good stretch where it was like consistent and good, but then it was like they didn't have enough people. And then they were like blaming the turnover for lack of progress. And I'm like, well, that's not my fault, the turnover. So stuff like that. And so I do miss having like someone to bounce ideas off, which is like his old BCBA was like so communicative and collaborative with us. I loved that. The newer BCBA wasn't really like that. Like, we would have our little meetings and stuff because she had to with us, but it just didn't feel like the things we talked about were being implemented. So we just knew it was our time to be done. And so right now he is in an autism program at school. And all that means basically is that he has a place to go and has a teacher that's over basically directing how he works in the school. So how much time does he have in the general ed classes, making sure he gets his hours with mental health, OT, and speech in school. She's basically his main teacher, his autism teacher, but she's his special education teacher. So we do the IEP with her and all that kind of stuff. So he's doing services and stuff like that. And, we saw a lot of progress every time we took a break from therapies. And and I do believe that was from therapy and that it was just able to be shown to us when a little bit of a break. And, we're having autism's always here. And so that's how it is. And then I don't know, some days I'm like, oh, should I have not stopped ABA? But I just feel like we learned so much. And part of our ABA process was very much training us how to follow the program. And, which I think all good therapies and therapists should be doing because we're the parents and we have to like implement that stuff. And then other services and stuff like he's done swim. We'll talk about waivers in the next episode, but through our waiver, we're able to get some funding for him to do swim classes. And so we had him in private swim classes before, and now he's in a small group, which is like pretty amazing. It's a slow progression, but things like that. And then now that we have more time and stuff, he's always responded well to music therapy. So I think that's going to be our next step. And then we've always talked about doing hippotherapy, which is horse back riding therapy for people who don't know. I didn't know what hippotherapy meant before. I was like,
yeah,
water.
That's something I've always wanted to do, and we've always like almost done it, but it's either been like too expensive or too far away or like too crazy for me to like fit in with the 9 million other things that we were doing. But like I've always wanted to do that.
I have two. Me and him, though, both have like insane allergies, and I'm allergic to horses. So I have a feeling that I'm more allergic to cats. Sorry, cat ladies. But I just don't know how it turned out. And the wait list is always long because here I live in a 4-season state. So it's only certain times of year you can do it. So it like fills up. But I would love to try it. And then other service wise, like we do respite and we have different programs in our state. Like, so we go through a company called Colorado Family Caregivers, which is statewide. So I don't feel like we are giving out their name. They won't specify anything about my location, but they're really great because they help supply you with family. Like, so we've had family members certified to be respite for us that get paid through this company that like you technically work for this company. We have Community Connector, which encourages people to take their children with disabilities out in the community. And the caregivers. So like my mother-in-law is certified to do that. So she could take him out in the community and get paid to do that, which is cool. Like not crazy amount of hours or anything, but it's like really great to get him out doing everyday things. And like, as he gets older, like someone showing him at a grocery shop and things like that. So yeah, we use Colorado Family Caregivers, which is really cool. They were started by a family with a child with disabilities and just basically teach families how they can access all this like cool stuff that Colorado has to offer. So yeah.
That's awesome.
So Kaya was diagnosed at 2.5, a little bit closer to 3, and she's 14 now. So even back then, the first thing they suggested was ABA. I think it's still the go-to. They tell you when your kid's
it's like
diagnosed.
the staple.
Yeah, it's kind of the staple. ABA was, I'll be honest, it wasn't for us. It wasn't, definitely wasn't for me. We did it in a beautiful center, but I always said, you're paying for that beautiful center. It was kind of the typical turnover, every time you go in, there's somebody else. It just didn't work for us until it did, which is interesting because it gravely changed my opinion. So we did that. And then I got lucky enough. I've spoken and written about Jackie, Kaya's SLP, extensively. She was with us she was a speech language pathologist. She really taught me how to do a lot of things. Like she was a real big, firm believer that, you have to carry it at home. You have to do the work at home. We can only do so much. I can't do this on my own kind of thing. So she was really pivotal in kind of all of the changes we made. From Jackie, we met Chelsea
like the
Cheeseburger.
Mindset. She shifted so much of like the paradigm.
She shifted so much of where I was at. And then we got connected with Chelsea, which was Kaya's OT, through Jackie, which was you've all met Chelsea. I mean, she's just extraordinary. I mean, imagine getting her with your kid. I mean, we were all taken aback by her interview, but imagine getting her to be with your kid. So that was really amazing. And then through Chelsea, we kind of got onto the feeding clinic, and that was life-changing for Kaya. She was 8 years old. She had never swallowed or chewed what's considered a solid food. So she ate Cheerios. That's not considered a solid food. Things that dissolve like that. And she did a feeding clinic, and it was ABA based in the sense of it was reward based. So she would try something and get the yogurt melts that she liked. So that was kind of how they did it. And other than that, we've not really done anything outside of that. Nothing kind of out of the norm for therapies. We did a little bit of horse therapy, but she was 4 and she was too young, and all she wanted to do was sit on the ground because it was too long. Believe it or not, the wait lines were too long of when the kids got to do the. So we, kind of dabbled in that. We did Special Olympics, but outside of that, we've not. We just did the typical ABA, speech, OT. Yeah, I'm on the same thing as Jaime. As I did limit the amount of therapy we did do because I also felt like she's a child and a human being, and she cannot be
And
doing.
it becomes so overwhelming, right? Like
Yeah, it's overwhelming for
takes...
everybody.
Yeah.
For everybody. So I did limit that amount of stuff. We did speech exclusively, and then we did OT exclusively. And then did kind of honed in on little things at a time. For me, and I've said that many times, I don't think it's a therapy at all. I truly believe it's a therapist. And I got so lucky with Jackie and Chelsea, just lucky. Kind of the road we've been on.
It's cool to have a network, where one leads to the other, and they all sort of like honor where you've just been because they know each other enough to, like your OT is not going to be dealing with food stuff if they know that you've been referred to them through this other, that avenue.
Well, and that's, I got lucky with those two because they both stepped out of their sort of zones. Jackie, being her SLP, went to her kindergarten orientation with me. I mean, not a lot of SLPs come on a Monday night to kindergarten because it was my entry into special education, and I didn't know what to ask for. I didn't know what to look for. And quite frankly, I couldn't even say the word autism yet. So, I mean, this woman came with me and literally held me up in my chair the whole time because all I could do was cry, And then same with Chelsea. Chelsea made an About Kaya book when we entered school. She did an All About Kaya book, which seems so, oh, that makes sense. But it didn't because I'd never seen anything like it through all of the school stuff. So just those two women in particular went out of their way above and beyond what their profession, was, because they truly cared about my kid. So they truly cared about Kaya and her success. But you, Rachie?
Man, we have been through some stuff. As I'm listening to you guys, I think this episode is going to be so cool for listeners because, over the course of our different series that we've had, we talk about this sort of service or this sort of therapy or whatever. Like we've talked about communication, but I don't think we've ever had an episode where it's sort of not necessarily in chronological order, but where we tick off each of the things. And so as I've been listening to you guys, like, gosh, this is a layered web we're in, it's crazy. We moved a lot with Celie, like just because of our life, we were moving around when she would have been in sort of like early education and like the Head Start programs. If we'd been consistent, like meaning if we had roots settled and we were in a school district and whatever, she probably would have been flagged for some stuff by the schools or met some qualifying conditions or whatever. But we missed all of that because we just were, I don't know, moving and whatever. She was diagnosed at 4, and that's sort of when all of it begins for us. So we moved to Minnesota, and there, I've discussed this multiple times, but this is as much a therapeutic service as any other part has been. I went to this Coops Troop dinner, and when I met all of these moms that sort of told me like, hey, you're super tired and it's this real reason, and what you're going through is something, and we've all been through that. Here's the first 3 things you need to handle. I was able to get my kids some insurance. We got on a waiver. We went through this like state medical review team situation. We even got a new pediatrician all within several weeks of that first encounter with so much of this, autism network that we have here. From there, though, even though we knew Celie had autism, we live in an area with resources, we were referred to all of this ABA therapy, all of these places offer it. We were like left, right, up and down, aging out, too verbal, too aggressive, too behavioral, too whatever for everybody. So she ended up first at school, like starting school at pre-K. She was in a level 3 program, and we were in that through pre-K, kindergarten, and first grade. In that time, Celie was diagnosed with some mental health stuff. So there was therapy around that, which was like family therapy for Billy and I, to develop skills to better support Celie and to understand what her mental health struggle could be affecting and like how to help her cope through that. And that's sort of our paradigm shifter, like Jenn had mentioned, where we sort of were trained to know that we set the tone and that we don't want to like shame her around her anxiety and depression, but we got to give her these tools and we have to work together with this language. And it was like, you know, we were taught how to teach her sort of at that time. During that very same set of like pre-K to first grade, we went through the ringer of the medical tests that you are so curious about as an autism parent. Like, can my kid hear? Is my kid having a seizure? Is that thing that she's doing typical? Is that typical for this road? Does she sleep? Is it possible that she could sleep? What should we give her for medication to make her sleep? Like it's been a lot of like testing in that time where everything concluded the same darn thing. My kid has autism. My kid is the autism that doesn't sleep. She has mental health conditions that make all of it more complicated. And there's even more on top of that. So like, but each of those things was this big, huge, terrifying test, you know, going to Mayo Clinic and having the goddamn things glued to your head. And I don't know, like we did all the medical stuff. Did you guys do that?
No. I mean, we
So,
did like a hearing test and stuff like that to make sure that his lack of like response wasn't due to hearing, but we've never done like anything neurological because he doesn't have seizures or anything. So it's just never been brought up.
we did
Yeah.
2 hearing tests. The first one was inconclusive, so they had to do another one, and they still weren't 100% sure.
Well, here's
Because
the deal. Like Celie Flanagan is 9 years old, and her most recent one was done in Gretchen's office, who I adore. Right, this our pediatrician, and she goes, "Yeah, so Celie failed the entire low register, but the chances are just as likely that Celie just didn't like the sound, so she didn't raise her hand, than it is that she didn't hear them. She doesn't startle. She doesn't this. Like she listed all these other things, and she's like, we're gonna cross that off the list for now, but." I don't think that was a real test. Like,
so Alyssa also had an EEG when she
yeah.
was 2.5, which was horrific. They thought they saw her shoulder twitching during the evaluation for the autism evaluation. So they wanted to rule out seizures, and they had her wrapped up like a little mummy. It was the saddest thing you've ever seen. And Neil left. He literally left her. He's like, I cannot do this. And he walked out and like left. So, and I wanted to also leave with her, and she was saying, help me, and this was my nonverbal child who didn't even have sounds. Okay, like it was horrible. But obviously if there was seizures, we needed to know.
Yeah.
She did not fall asleep. They like them to fall asleep. She fell asleep for like a few minutes, but there was no seizure activity that they could see. Hence, when she was 14 and she had her first seizure, she had to go and get another one of these tests.
Mhm.
Which was very challenging. They were super patient with her, but like she was very resistant to it. She obviously doesn't like all these things glued in her hair, and she really, really tried to cooperate. You cannot sedate for an EEG because they have to see your brain go from like a wake state to sleep state, and that's where they can pick up the seizure. Because that's what a lot of people say, oh, why don't they sedate her? And that they can't do that. She didn't go to sleep. She tried. She laid down. They had her in the dark room. The lady's like, yeah, this is the best that we're going to get. But it was normal from what they could see. And then she had to get an MRI, which they had to put her under general anesthesia for that because, yeah, you ain't getting her on an MRI machine. So it's not happening. That was through Children's Hospital. They were great. It was very quick. They were able to do like blood work for her when they put her in the machine. And anytime Alyssa has to get blood work, she has to be sedated. Like she can't get blood out of her. So we always had a thing with our pediatrician. She would put in the orders through the ER. The ER has practicing rights at Children's Hospital, and we'd go in, they'd sedate her orally because you ain't getting an IV in her arm. Because if you get an IV in her arm, You could get blood out of her. I mean, she can't even get a vaccination. I don't
Yeah.
know. Maybe she could do it now. They have a program at her doctors where now they're like, yeah, you're just going to bring her in and we're going to get her comfortable and they're going to practice. And they're very confident they're going to be able to do it. I am not very confident that they're going to be able to do it because she has this thing that's like senses danger. And this other thing that's like, okay, my mom wants me to do this. It must be okay. I want to do what my mom wants me to do. So I'm going to give you my arm. Oh no, when you come over there with that needle, she's like, nope. It's a safety issue. They can't be jabbing a needle in somebody her size that's like flailing around. So yeah,
Don't
I
tell
don't
me no.
she is due for some shots now, so I don't know. So we're at the point where like I know medical is a little different than therapies, but so now she's 28 and she's never had an exam, a woman's exam. She's obviously not sexually active, so it's not like, crucial, but probably at some point she'll need to get one. So her doctor says if she's able to get the HPV vaccinations, it decreases her chances so much that like
Yeah.
they wouldn't need to do a PAP. I don't know how I feel about that. Like part of me is like just sedate her and like do the exam. Like I don't not sedate her that have to put her under, but then that terrifies me, so I don't know. But my concern is if I bring her to the doctors 3 times in a row to get shots 3 times in a row, she's probably never going to want to go back to that doctor's again.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's just everything is just super, super, super challenging. When she was with the pediatrician, which she left when she was 25, they always just sent her to the hospital to get her sedated. She hasn't had to get blood work. Eventually, she's going to need blood work because of her seizure medicine. It has to be done. Now, these are all different people that you have to sit there and explain to them, and then they're not going to believe me. So I'm going to have to bring her in, and then not going to be able to get her blood. And then they're going to have to like come up with some kind of plan because.
Oh my God, that's like the nail in the hand.
Yeah.
It's just terrible.
Yeah. So I feel like is a lot more understanding now. So like she may be more open to it, but she's also more aware. So it's kind of like a catch-22, The more
Mhm.
aware she is, the more she's kind of like zeroes in on things is like, hell no. So yeah, so medical stuff is also challenging,
Well, we
I
did that for like a good long while. We just tested. I mean, we just kept getting all these referrals to places of like, oh my God, you got to check this. And we just would go down that road until it was inconclusive or supported what we know to be true or whatever. And then try to take those people's paperwork or referral to the next place. And one of the things about being Sealy's, I'll just tie up her services quick here, is like we learned early on to cast many wide nets because chances are she'll be too verbal, too aggressive, too this, too that, for whatever particular thing. And like, we don't know if we're in need when they finally have a space available, but I'm happy to turn somebody down because we're doing so darn well. That hasn't happened yet. Like,
yeah,
anyway, after all of that medical quest or whatever for answers, just to make sure we weren't missing something for her, we ended up hooking up with Chris for respite services, which I've talked at length about, the impact on our family. We ended up going half days at school. So she went from half day at school, half day at ABA, because school just was not like picking up what we were laying down in terms of our needs, our expectations, our goals for safety. Like, education was not our focus as much as let's learn how to walk through a door or like not hurt people when they say the word NO or whatever. So we did a couple of different ABA clinics.
Mhm.
Led to another kind of deal for us. We just kept getting like, oh, this maybe isn't the right fit. Oh, here's this other intake, Ultimately, the big shift for our family came 2 years or so ago. We did a short-term crisis stabilization foster placement with the Lindsay family. Sealy stayed there for 83 days. In that time, we advocated for a school change. We didn't get that, but she ended up eventually getting into a level 4 school, which is where she is now. And that has made a world of difference. So right now she's in baseball. We're wondering about music therapy again. She does the sports sampler thing in the spring. She's in a level 4 school. We have respite. We're not safe and we're not doing great. So we're shaking the tree again, just like all the time looking for the right constellation of supports and people and structure and stuff to like get us stable and meds and all of it. I mean, it's just it has been such a layered thing to try and find like help. You guys have been here for so long of our journey, or like so much a part of this several years I've talked about. Like we have fought so hard to get help for Sealy, and it's like daunting. I mean, it's been my full-time job in addition to being her caregiver. It's crazy. Just finding it, fitting there, figuring it out.
It's like just finding the right things that work for your kids. Like, does this therapy work, or this, or you might have like Jen had an occupational therapist who was like helped with so many other things in their lives.
Right.
Like, it's just not just the therapy is the right fit, but also the people. It's so convoluted. But I was going to say also, like, in our area, our Special Olympics is really great. He's registered to do the Special Olympics, but we've never done any of those activities because he's always done Miracle League and Top Soccer. And those things are all great too. And even through our city. So make sure you guys check your cities. Like they do like swim lessons for kids with or individuals with disabilities. And they have programs. They're usually for like teenagers and up for most of the things near us. But there are some things that I'm excited for him to do and have a place to like go meet other kids with disabilities or other kids maybe like him. So just look and see, because that's not even through a waiver or anything like that. That's just like, like if your city has swim classes or soccer leagues.
And we did start adaptive dance for Alyssa.
Oh, I love it too.
I think that was something that like, it's just weird. It's like, I feel like it's like day late and a dollar short. And I feel like that's just how it's been for her because like now they have so many different programs, but they end at 18. But when she was in that age range, they had stuff for like little kids, but not older kids. When she was a little kid, I mean, they had nothing. And I always said, why don't they have like a gymnastic program for special needs? Like, or, all these things, and they never had them. And a lot of the things that they have, like, it's like, oh, here's this for children with autism, but that's like a blanket statement. Like what's going to work for Sealy and work for Jesse is not going to be the same program that's going to be good for Alyssa or for Kaya. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's such a range. And like with Alyssa being nonverbal, that's just a whole nother layer of like, people aren't always prepared to interact with somebody who's nonverbal or understand how to interact with them. So it's like, or someone who doesn't follow like verbal directions, she needs like visual cues. Even though she understands a lot, she still needs, you really need to show her for her to like really be able to like process it to the point that she understands it and then can like follow the direction. So it's like, I get these things, but it's like, okay, it's not the level of special needs that Alyssa had, unfortunately.
Even if the programming is right for Lou, it doesn't mean that there's going to be someone that's locking the door or I mean, standing in front of the door or like keeping the wandering kid in. Like there's so many aspects to support,
there's
right?
so many aspects. And a lot of these are like general, like it's always like, oh, like you could come play basketball or you can do a cooking class, but it's like, are they prepared to do, they're not prepared to do a cooking class. You would have to like do it with her as opposed to be like, okay, everybody, like, I don't know. So it's always been really challenging for me to find things for her to do. I really was doubtful with the dance. I was really nervous about it. And then finally I was like, we'll just try it. I had them, Kira, her sister, who was 16, I think at the time, did the class with her. So she kind of was her little like peer that went in the class with her, modeled it for her. So like she had her sister there to do it. And then this class is run by like an OT though. And it's an adaptive dance class. Like they have a special needs teacher who I think she works at like ABA Center or something. And then this other lady who's an OT and they run the program. So it's like they know what they're doing and they know how to relate to these kids. Like she's awesome. And then they love Alyssa. Like and Alyssa's awesome. Like she picks it up. So she's so good at imitating. So it's like, and they're always modeling it for them while they do it. So Alyssa she started the class 5 months late and she knew the dance before.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't like to use lowest level. I know that's icky now, but like, as far as like her verbal skills and like her understanding and her ability to follow verbal directions, like she's definitely in that lower end of the class and she like is picking it up way faster than like some of the other people. So it's like, it's just so interesting what you think they can do and handle. Sometimes you just got to try it. I mean, she really loved it. They invite them to do the recital. She's done the recital. She does great. You know, she struggles with the costume a little bit, but like now that she's done it for a couple of years in a row, it's like the thing with her is like the more you repeat something and the more she understands like what to expect. When she kind of can understand that expectation, she does a lot better. The first year the recital was horrible because during COVID, they had it outside in the parking lot. She killed it, nailed it. The next year they had it at a local high school. Was like, where are we? Like, why are we at this random place?
Yeah.
Like, this is not my dance school. And it was
I don't go here.
really bad. And she
Excuse
really
me,
had
are we supposed to be busting
it was
cutting a rug in the parking lot? There we are.
She really had a massive meltdown, and like I didn't think she would do it. And then she saw her teacher and it just clicked for her. Now this year she was fine. She understands everything that's happening. I love that they include this class also in the recital. Like I think that's really, really inclusive. Like, I really love that. And they, it's a huge range. You have some kids that are verbal, some kids that are not, some people in there have physical disabilities. It's like from age 8 and up, there's no cap on it, which is great. And so many of the things that I see, it's like, oh, I swear to God, to 18. Then it was to 22. Now everything's till 25. I'm like, WTF? Like this stuff drives, it drives me. It makes me want to rip my hair out. I'm not even kidding.
Just so some of these programs, it's like if you're going to offer this, you need to offer it to everyone. And like that's why I love like our Miracle League is the coolest place on earth. It doesn't matter age, it doesn't matter ability. There are people with CP, there's people with walkers, and like to Jesse who can like run around and stuff, but he doesn't necessarily understand what's really going on in the game. Like there's just all sorts of levels. It's like a beautiful place and I love it so much. And you just don't see that with a lot what's to offer in general in this realm of like, oh, we do adaptive this and this. And it's like, okay, like what are you imagining when you say that? Because
I know that's my thing too, Jamie, that I'm always like, I don't know that they are really prepared to deal with like somebody who's like nonverbal, who can't really follow directions without some kind of visual cues. It's like, I know that that's not what they're picturing,
We honestly, all of our kids have this like needs 1-to-1, needs 1-to-2, needs 2-to-1. So how can you say that we're going to bake muffins today with 13 of my kids when you've got one teacher at the front? Like, stop the madness.
If there's an oven involved, no,
yeah.
you're gonna need an individual at each
and I'm not going to down this program because it's a great program, Special Olympics, but they had an area swimming program, which I was going to sign her up for. And they're like, oh no, but she has to race. And I'm like, well, I don't really know that she's going to understand what that means. Like she's going to go in the pool and she's going to swim the way she swims. She's not going to swim back and forth on a lap. I can just tell you that right now. So it's like she was excluded from doing it because you have to compete, which I mean, I guess the rules are the rules, but like, it's like, okay, but there's nothing that like fits what she wants to do. You know what I mean? So it's like, she's not going to understand competing unless you're competing for a brownie. Like she does not, and she will win that competition. I can guarantee that.
That's the coolest part about the Miracle League for us too, is like Sealy there's so many peers doing so many different things and everybody has different strengths and weaknesses, and like there's these magical couple of places, but access and getting it and having it in your city. And frankly, for us, like we live in a very accessible area for lots of people. I can't do shit with Celia at 6:30 at night. Like, don't even talk to me about putting her in a car in the evening through the winter.
I was just going to say, Rachel, a lot of the programs that I did find that possibly would be a fit for Alyssa are always like 9 a.m. The girl don't go to bed till 4:30. Like I can't get her up and get her somewhere by 9 to bowl. Like, she loves to bowl, but like she can't do it at 9 a.m. Like it's just not.
I'm like, we could be there at 9 because we've been up since Thursday.
Yeah, we could be there.
My kid's gonna be naked and throwing. Yeah. Oh, it's so hard. Well, I have to just reiterate one more time. I'm sorry that, like, to the parents listening, you shouldn't be listening to the 55 things that we've all just rattled off and think like, I'm not doing enough. Each of these things have been in their time with a whole process attached to each and every one of them. And they've started and stopped at certain periods of our kids' lives because we as a family don't have the bandwidth. Our kid doesn't have the bandwidth. We no longer have insurance coverage for that or time. Like there's so many things that make all of these layers in our story like start and stop. Just give yourself a break and know that because you care this much and you're listening to this podcast in your free time, you're doing enough. Like it's so hard. It's
Well,
hard.
yes, and I think that you have to make an individual decision on what's right for your child and your family. And if it's causing more stress and more havoc, then it's causing that you're gaining from it, then you
But
have
I
every
also
right to
think
stop.
I've always said this after our first jaunt through ABA, that autism has become a money-making machine. And they don't care what you got going on. They're going to pump you in and out of as many therapies as they can suck you dry for. And I mean that.
It's usually the corporations who are running it.
Yeah,
So
like it's just
a
turned
person
into,
might
yes,
have
it's
to-
turned into like this machine of, you know, and the turnover. And it's like Jamie's, it's a corporation. Yes, just what they can bill you out for. So I've always said that, Kimmy. It's literally turned into a money-making machine.
But I think that sometimes, I mean, I know as far as like say speech therapy, like they can't get insurance to cover if they can't show progress, right? But it's like if you are like ripping your hair out, if your kid's screaming and crying in the car, if your other kids are now eating McDonald's in the car 3 nights a week and like not getting their homework done because it's like you have to travel 45 minutes to get to this thing.
Yeah.
It's not going to be the end all be all of your child's life. It feels like it. It feels like when you hear
But
other
that
people doing things and people tell you, oh, you have to do this, you got to do this. It's like
early
you also
intervention. Yeah.
you also have to do what like can keep you sane and keep you like being a mother that's
alive.
present
Well,
and
that was
like
my other point to
sane.
that is that they will pump you. I mean, this kid with as much therapy as they can cram it into a day. And you cannot expect these children to go to school all day and then go to therapy at night. It's just too much. But again, Kimmy, it's that they will do that and do that and do that
At
regardless.
the same time, though, you could be a family that needs more and more support. And it's still like, I don't know, getting the right thing out of the right people at the right time and the ones that you have at your doorstep or you're at theirs is really, really like having a royal flush. Like it happens, but it's not always the first thing that's dealt, you know, like, I don't know. We have been through some stuff that I thought we'd swear off. I mean, many of us have the public school story and we're like, oh, we're never going back there. We're in the best public school setting we could imagine right now. It's the only thing holding our family together. And I say that after 90 days of not having it in the summer. Like,
yeah, literally.
Like, or Jen's story with ABA. Like, I hate that service. I'm not doing that therapy. Oh my God, it saved our life again. Like,
yeah.
Going back to speech when you've sworn off speech, maybe you just had a shit therapist. Maybe, I don't know. It's just like, it's always
or like Kimmy said, you just need a break. Sometimes you just need a break. You need a break. Your kid needs a break. You just need a break.
Yeah.
And they talk about it like right from the get-go, early intervention. It's like the machine starts the moment that doctor gives you that diagnosis. It's like they just pressure you. They pressure the parents who feel guilty, who feel like they have to jam their kid into as much therapy as they can possibly do. And I can tell you right now, it is not going to change an ounce the trajectory of your child's life. Yes, it's helpful. It's life-changing in many ways. But that urgency that's put on you when your kid is first diagnosed is not going to make a drop of a difference in your kid's life. And these vultures come out by the drones. It's like they can smell you like prey, like your nervousness of getting your child as much help as you can possibly get them. And I feel like a lot
for
of times
us, it was more about like, which I totally believe like the brain is developing so much in those first few years, and I get that importance. But then you're told all that, and then they're like, okay, now you need to go on your wait list, and you're like, oh,
wait list, yes,
6 by then or 5 by then. They're going to be aged out of this like magical time, which there's science behind that, and I believe therapists support that because it is true that it does help. But I had such a hard time with that too, because then you just feel like you didn't do enough, and like, do what you can do. And that's okay.
Mhm.
Like doing 40 hours instead of 20 hours could, I think, for us, it would have probably just been more damaging. Like the kid needed to be a kid
Mhm.
a little bit too.
Get a little bit, yeah.
So it's like we did
Yeah,
less
exactly.
we needed to.
And even Jackie or Chelsea, they'd be like, I think she needs a little break. Like I think she just needs a little break. So
Mm.
even having a therapist recognize your kid's a little burnt out. I mean, I think as parents
Yeah.
we come in fried out. Like just here we are another
But that's the
Saturday.
other thing. Like, I can remember clear conversations with Jaime, and I remember them vividly because I have felt the exact same way. If I allow for my kid to have a break right now, which my mom gut is saying, like, take right now, like, stop this service, give her a second, take a beat as a family, then we lose the whole opportunity and we return to the back of the list. Like,
Well,
it
that's the
feels like
downfall,
you're
right?
giving
Yeah.
up everything because these therapy centers that have year-long wait lists are like, oh my God, the Flanagans missed their fifth appointment. They're done with us. Let's get the Joneses in.
And
Like,
I'm certainly not
Oh, I
speaking for
know.
Tabitha because Tabitha spoke about this very openly, but she even said like when they moved and they sort of pared back all the things that they were doing and all the pressures that were essentially on their kids, she's like, there was just this growth of her kids.
blossoming.
And
Especially with
she's
Nora, yeah.
spoken about this. Yeah. That
Mhm.
taking off that, not necessarily the therapy, because I certainly would not say that nor speak for her in that manner, but taking off sort of that pressure off her kids was like life changing for them, like in their development.
I'm usually the one like, oh, I wasn't very good about my gut, but go with your gut or go with like, when Jesse first started ABA, where we were looking, there was one place that it's like, oh, he's going to need to do 40 hours a week and this and this and that. And so we didn't go to that place. And we went to a place that was more like, we did a little less. We started lower and then, like it just worked better for us. And it just seemed, I was just more comfortable. It just felt good as opposed to the other place where it just like kind of freaked me out. I'm like, he's just a little kid. And I'm not judging anyone who did 40 hours a week of ABA for their kids when they were 2 or whatever. But like for us, I was just like, oh no, like it just, like it wouldn't work
Mm-hmm.
for it. I didn't feel comfortable with it, but we still did therapy. We just did it in our own way and time. Kind of
But
a
I
thing.
also think these ABA clinics, some of them are almost like taking the place of school. So that's why the people do the 40 hours because essentially they need somewhere for the kids to be while they work. I think
Yeah,
that's
Yeah.
we
like,
were in ABA.
do you
We
know what I
were
mean?
looking
You know?
specifically for 40 hours because I had to tell the state that she was learning something someplace. So, like,
Yeah.
sometimes the situation dictates what you have to ask for. And, like we'll talk
Yeah.
about in our episode with Diane, it's in many ways, it all has to go up or down from billing or what's possible. It's not chosen by the parents or the person writing the plan. It's later discussed and approved by the people paying. I mean, there's a lot of layers to these things, and it's not.
I was just gonna say at the ABA, do whatever you're comfortable with, but don't depend on it because there's no, like for our kids, we can't always put our kids in daycare. They don't have the setup for our kids.
Mhm.
But ABA also has such a high turnaround that they're gonna cancel you on, on you all the time, so they're
That's
not
true.
reliable. But
Yeah,
where else? And then when people judge ABA and people that put their kids in ABA, it's like it's the only thing that takes insurance. I mean, besides speech and OT, but those aren't gonna take your kids all day. There's nowhere else for our kids to go. Like
plus, literally every assessment or assessor says it, unless they're within the school district, which is touting their own rhetoric. Like,
well, that's only like, okay, if your kid's under 4, they go to preschool and that's half a day. And it's like, how am I supposed to pay for all this stuff if I can't work because my kid's in school for 2.5 hours or 3.5 hours?
It's crazy.
Sorry,
And
go
like
ahead.
we were in a situation where like Alyssa like started speaking at 22 when she was aging out of school. And I was frantic because I'm like, now she's gonna have no therapist, no nothing. And we found a speech therapist that took adults and it went really well at first. And then obviously COVID hit and she was not a fan of the virtual, so she just stopped doing it. And then they would get mad because like we'd come on late, I wouldn't be able to get her to sit and whatever, like how
I
Rachel was
hate
just kind of
that.
saying. Yeah, it's just sometimes they don't have a realistic like view of like what is happening. Like, sorry, my kid's tearing apart the house, throwing things, breaking things, and it's a miracle she's not hurting somebody. Sorry if I can't get her to sit on the chair in front of the computer on time.
Right.
And I was very like I was very distressed about this because I felt like this is like her chance to be able to communicate, even though it's on a very much smaller scale than like, you know, what I may have imagined in the beginning when you had nothing, not even sounds for up until 18, for her to start saying. Even now, I said to Neil the other day, I can't believe she hasn't always done this now. I forget. This is new. This is still
Yeah.
only a few years old, right? So we stopped the speech, but guess what? The language is still growing. She's still doing it. She's still learning. And I'm not working with her as much as I was. I mean, I was working with her all the time, and now I don't do it as much as I would like to. By that, I'm not really doing it at all. So I really do want to start doing it again.
So basically, I'm going to start that right back up.
Yeah. So now she's getting no mom speech and no speech. But guess what? She knows who freaking Spider-Man is. So
Yeah.
she's still learning. She's still coming up with new words and understanding new concepts and new things. And that's with zero therapy. And she does not get any therapy at school. Let me just be clear. School is like recreational.
Day have
She's
recreational.
still learning. She's still producing sounds in words. She's still understanding more. So it's like, as much as it's like in my mind, it was like I have to get her into speech. And I'm not saying it didn't help. It definitely did help. You know, I probably at some point we will maybe like circle back and revisit it. But she's still learning, and it hasn't like impacted, like she didn't regress when she stopped speech. Like her speaking and you know, now she's got more words. Now she can string some words together even. It's still happening. So it's like, as much as you kind of sometimes feel, and I'm not saying speech therapy is great. Get your child into speech therapy. I highly, highly recommend it if you can. Like, no, I'm not saying that it's not important and it's not helpful, but sometimes they may get places a little bit quicker. And sometimes it's nice having a professional do it as opposed to taking it on yourself, but they're still gonna either talk or not talk.
They're all tools to open up a mindset or a new skill or whatever. That's what all these therapies and services do. They like either give you a skill or relieve the pressure or teach you something or open up a, you know, like, I don't know.
But I do believe
But
that
they
kids grow
still
out
all
of
have to
certain.
be implemented. For our kids, our kids have regression in common. There's going to be these things that you like fall on the wagon and you're focused on, and then you fall off the wagon, fall on the wagon.
Yep.
I said, sweet
I
Jesus.
think they do have like spikes, right? Spikes and regressions. And
Yeah.
I'm not trying to say, we're not trying to say that therapies aren't important and they don't help your child progress. They absolutely do. But I think there are certain therapies that certain kids grow out of. You know, sometimes what works at 3 and 5 don't work at 7 and 9. Our
Or
kids get tired, you know?
Or like the way it's implemented, like over the computer did not work for Alyssa. That when the whole COVID thing happened, I think most of us like trying to do the therapies and stuff over the computer, it was like half the time I would just be talking to the therapist with Jesse like on the other side of the room because he couldn't even understand what was going on. You know, it's like what could work, and sometimes it's taking a break and then going to a completely different therapist and seeing if that's better, you know?
Yeah,
the other
exactly. Yeah, that's right too.
the other thing that we've learned now that, you know, we've been this many years into the journey and a whole page through a list of people of things that we've tried, we really lean on the therapist with our whole problem, not just like, hey, let me sign up for speech and see what she qualifies for, and then you can tell me what you're going to work on her with. Instead, I can be like, hey, you're a speech therapist. You can describe how, like, I don't know, we have this speech therapist that worked with her about emotions and using language. It wasn't just about like the L sound for love. It was like just broader strokes, like a speech therapist that helps with feeding or whatever. Like there's more to it than just one clear path and lane that most therapists do for most kids or that you know of. It could be
Yeah, like
broader.
more well-rounded.
Yeah.
Where they're not just lays it in on one thing. Yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
Well, so that's a whole lot of therapies to digest for you
Yeah.
people. Anyone has anything different to add, write to us and yeah, we'll talk about it.
Thanks,
But thanks for
everybody.
joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great day.
See
Bye.
you next week.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Talk Like a Mother Parenting Autism podcast. If you are enjoying our podcast, make sure to rate and review us wherever you listen. And if you'd like to support us, you can become a subscriber. Just check out the description of this episode. Give us a follow on Facebook and Instagram for more content, and we'll see you next time.